Hello, I'm Andrew Prosser from the Green Party, and I am standing in Witney North for the District Council and Witney North and East for the County Council. So thanks very much Wood Green School for sending through your questions to me from the sixth form, and I'm now going to try my best to answer those questions. So first question, what would I do to promote the High Street as we come out of lockdown? The High Street is really struggling. A lot of that is to do with the lockdown, but it's also because of online shopping and the trends that have taken people away from the High Street. So what I do, I think the most important thing is to really create a buzz in the High Street again. I'd look to push for more outside seating and drinking and eating, better arts and leisure facilities in the town. So for example, smaller bowling alleys, particularly some of the bigger units on Marriott's Close, they might be suitable for that type of thing. That's the first thing. The other thing we've got to do is tackle, obviously a lot of people are shopping online. How can we link in with online shopping and use that to promote shops and retail outlets in the town itself? I mean, one idea, and I've heard this idea elsewhere, is where some of the online shoppers actually rent a retail space for a shorter term. And that can also help sort of revive the high street if you keep those outlets busy as well. So there's a lot to do. It's not easy. Some of it's going to improve anyway as we come out of lockdown, but there's a lot we can do in terms of the council to support that. So how can the council actually help shops themselves who are suffering from very high rates and rents, actually help them sort of become viable and keep operating? I mean, the first thing to say is the rents and rates are outside the control of the council. The rates are set nationally by the government, and rents are actually set by landlords. However, what the council can do is work with some of those landlords to try and encourage more flexible use of those facilities. Obviously we can try and put pressure onto the government nationally to look at rates. We can also try through the planning system to make sure the retail outlets, some of them may change use, so to be more flexible in the types of people that are using those outlets, so they don't all have to be a certain type of shop. And we can also work through promoting businesses in the town. So that's one way to help try and bring in people from towns around Witney, but also from the Cotswolds, also tourists, and that's all about having a very flexible approach to the outlets that we do have in the town, and over time trying to improve that kind of feel within the town itself. And one more thing, I think it's really important to say that not all the outlets in the town are owned by private landlords, and we've really got to do our best to make sure that some of these buildings stay within the ownership of the council or through other associations, and then we have a little bit more control about what's in these shops. A lot of these private outlets are owned by property investment companies that are far away, and they're not really that interested in those individual outlets. Obviously we try and put pressure on them, but it's really important that the council and other associations retain some of those buildings in the town. So what strategies are required to prevent serious further flooding in the area? Now, a subject that's very close to my heart because I work in the field of climate change, and we are having to adapt to climate change. Flooding is getting worse. We're seeing sort of periods of greater precipitation, heavier rain, and droughts in between. So it's only going to get worse with climate change, and we need to tackle that. So what can we do about that, given that some of these problems are global, but we can act local to try and sort of prevent some of the worst effects? The first thing is in terms of planning. The planning system, we need to make sure houses aren't getting built on floodplains. We need to make sure that sewage and drainage infrastructure is built correctly in housing developments at the start. That's the first area. The second area is to look at upstream of the river. So for example, for the River Windrush, where can we, up in the valleys of the Cotswolds, where can we retain and slow down water flow effectively So we don't have so many of these events where there's flash flooding and water coming down into Witney. So that's the second area. The third area is around our emergency response. When we do have flooding, how do we react to that? Over Christmas, the last emergency response wasn't that greatly planned. People sort of mucked in and the fire brigade were there, but we need to improve how we react as a community when there is actually flooding taking place. So how do we fit up barriers to stop some of that water coming through? The fourth area is around engineering. I mean, within the town itself, the water has to go somewhere. Where does that water go? At the moment, there's a big pinch point. There's a pinch point in the town under the bridge, and the water can't get through that in very high volumes in the flood time. So what are the alternatives? Is there another channel we can take? We certainly need to keep good clearance under that bridge for flood water, during flooding, and deal with it in that way as well. So, question about what can we do about criminality and drug use and taking in the town. Certainly the first thing is we need to improve, we need to have higher police numbers and community support in the town. Police numbers have reduced over the last decade. There's been a slight recovery over the last year, but we're still far behind the numbers we need for a town the size of Witney. So that's the first thing in terms of response times, so that there are police locally and they can get out to problem areas quickly, and they can keep an eye on what's happening in the town and look out for criminality. Certainly myself, I've experienced problems where there hasn't been a quick enough response time. They've taken 12 minutes in the middle of the night to come out to an attempted mugging. And we really need to sort out those problems so people have confidence that they're going to get police support quickly and on a regular basis. The second area, I think, is looking at drug and alcohol abuse as a health problem, a medical problem, and that's where we need to put our resources. It doesn't mean decriminalising drug taking everywhere, but it really means trying to focus on it as a medical and health problem, giving support to people in the community through medical and health support. That's the second area. The third area is so important, is really about giving people locally the opportunity, the types of jobs that are going to be interesting and fulfilling in the longer term. I'm not saying that's an easy thing, but basically we need to look at, particularly around the area I work in, around the environmental sector, the green transition that we have to make into improving insulation in our buildings, changing the types of vehicles we're using, all those things that have to take place in part of the green transition to reduce carbon emissions. They all have job opportunities, and we should be really working very hard locally with our business support organisations, schools, training skills, to equip people with the skills that they're going to need. And I know they're going to need those skills over the coming decades. So that's the third area is really trying to develop meaningful jobs in the locality, and also sports and leisure. That's so important in terms of giving people interesting things to do of all ages in the town, and I'm really keen that we improve our local sports and leisure facilities and provision as well. Okay, so the question is, what funding are we committed to improve roads and traffic congestion in Witney and the area around it over the coming years? The first thing to say, the funding comes from a number of streams. So it's through the council that raises money through things like council tax. It's also through central government funding for these schemes. And thirdly, it's in terms of new housing developments, there's a thing called a developer contribution, section 106 funding, which brings in money for local infrastructure. So we've got to look at all of these areas. The first area, there is a budget of around £30 million each year for maintenance and for improving actual roads and bridges. This is really crucial, and obviously we would retain that. The problem we have at the moment is there's too much patching up and making do on road services. We need to have proper engineering works done that's going to last they may cost more in the short term, but they will last for much longer. So that will be certainly a priority, but not reducing the budget in those areas. Another second area, which is a mix of local council funding, government funding and developer funding. Along the A40, they have £32 million set aside for the new links to Oxford, the bus lane, the park and ride, and the road, dualling the road along part of that section. Now, certainly retain that money, but I'm not a big fan of the big park and ride that they're investing in. Would reduce that down in size. I don't think people from Witney or Carterton are going to get in their cars, drive to Park and Ride in Ensham and then get on the bus to go to Oxford. So I think it's a bit of a bonkers idea, but it's really important to encourage people into buses, and also certainly to keep an option of the rail link going into Oxford and beyond, and that's certainly a priority for me. But finally, I'd just like to say, building more roads does not ease congestion. If you build more roads, more people will tend to use them, the number of car users go up, so the focus really has to be on encouraging people to take other means of travel when it's possible. It's not always possible for example, from villages, very reliant on cars, but certainly we need to really concentrate on improving the switch to people cycling, walking, putting in better lanes for mobility scooters as well. That's where we should be focusing our efforts, not on building new roads. So the question is, how would I encourage younger people to get involved with politics? Really important, and one thing I think that we have learnt during the lockdown is the importance of online meetings. At the moment, we still have online meetings. The government is going to make us actually have more face-to-face meetings again, but I think online meetings we must keep going in some shape or form, because that opens up access not just to younger people, but to people who find it difficult to physically get to meetings during the day. So that's one area. Of course, what I would like to do is see more younger people actually standing as local councillors, or getting involved through various campaign groups linked to the council. And I think part of that is really communicating what councils can do for young people locally. Obviously these questions are related to that. I'd also like to see, the idea I have is perhaps we could encourage more internships within the local council, so local young people could actually get internships within the council, experiencing how politics works on the ground. Obviously paid internships, I'm very keen that they're actually paid for as well, so people see the kind of work that councils do. So there are a number of areas. I think certainly the whole feel of council meeting and council business needs to be improved to younger people, getting away from any stuffiness. I mean, that has improved within Witney Town Council since we got rid of the requirement to wear a tie in a meeting, for example. So certainly to make council business and meetings much more informal and easy access, and to encourage different younger groups to they don't necessarily have to get directly involved in council business, but they can link in through their own groups to what's going on within the council. So just to say, thank you very much for your questions, really great questions. One area which I was a little bit surprised was not to get a question about the climate emergency. So that's really important that we keep asking politicians, business, our neighbours and family, what are they doing about the climate emergency? So I know you've raised really good questions, but I really encourage you to every time ask about that climate emergency as well. Thank you.